Let's get joined up. This week's show is sponsored by Bandcamp.com, an online record store and music community where passionate fans discover, connect with, and directly support the artists they love. There's thousands of bands and artists on there, including my band, the Rye Dogs, whose second album, Pigs Might Fly, is out right now. Here's a quick snippet of the title track, which is also available on Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Music. It's totally free to join Bandcamp, and as the Rye Dogs are brand new members, we're now looking to grow our fan base, so your support would be greatly appreciated. Just search the Rye Dogs, that's W-R-Y Dogs, and hit the follow button. Right, now we can cue the theme tune.
Joined up writing.
Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing podcast, where a little procrastination can go a long way. I'm Wayne Kelly, and it's episode 182 with returning guest Lauren North, aka LC North, talking about her addictively original new thriller, The Ugly Truth, as well as chatting about her approach to building a career as a published author and her thoughts on mentors, which brings me nicely to my little pre-interview catch-up, as I've got some exciting news of my own. As many of you know, I've been on my latest submissions journey for about the last 10 months or so with a totally new version of my crime thriller, Safe Hands. And whilst I haven't sent the book out to a ton of agents so far, I'm yet to get any real interest, and I obviously want to give myself the best chance possible and change that. And perhaps sensing my soul-crushing disappointment and impatience, the Twitter algorithm threw up a link to something called ThrillPit recently. That pairs unagented, aspiring writers of thriller and crime novels with mentors to help them with their manuscripts and guide them through the publishing process. All mentors are traditionally published, experienced authors, and I noticed that one of them was today's guest, actually, Lauren North. And Lauren had only recently given me some of the most constructively useful feedback on my work that I've ever had, to be honest. So as soon as I saw that she was one of the mentors, I knew I had to at least try to get on the scheme. Each author was only taking on one mentee. The submissions window was really brief, and you had to send your cover letter and your opening chapters. But to my absolute surprise and delight, I was accepted. And Lauren and I have already started working on the opening of Safe Hands, and her ideas and suggestions really chime with what I'm trying to do with the book. And even stuff as simple as changing the order of chapters is made such a big difference. Having a successful, traditionally published author as your mentor doesn't automatically guarantee that you'll find an agent or get any kind of success, obviously. But having someone like Lauren in my corner is a massive boost to my morale, and it's just got me really fired up to kind of push on for something to happen in this coming year, which is kind of how I felt since the beginning of the year anyway, so this is really, really going to help me. Lauren also writes crime and thrillers, so she understands the genre, and even from our initial discussions, I can tell she's on a similar wavelength, and she just gets my writing, which is just so encouraging and inspiring. So anyway, I'll stop blathering on about it now, as we do talk a bit about it in the conversation you're about to hear. But as you can probably tell, I'm thrilled to be part of ThrillPit, and congratulations to all the other authors that managed to secure a place on there as well. It's great. So that's my good news, but I'd love to hear more about what you're up to as well. So please drop me a line at wayne@waynekellywrites.com, or tweet the show at JU Podcast. Also, why not take a few seconds to join the email mailing list? It only requires your email address, and you'll get a couple of free short stories for signing up, and you'll also be the first to find out about upcoming shows and events. Right, let's get to today's interview with Lauren North. So, Lauren writes psychological suspense novels that delve into the darker side of relationships and families. She studied psychology before moving to London, where she lived and worked for many years, and she's now settled with her family in the Suffolk countryside, where her dark imagination never stops wondering what's the worst thing that could happen in every situation. She also writes book club thrillers under the guise of LC North, including her new book, The Ugly Truth, which is out everywhere now. So here's our chat, and I'll pop back at the end to wrap things up.
Joined up writing.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks so much for coming back on Joined Up Writing. Really appreciate it. So, how are things going? Give us a sense of where you're speaking from and how things are going in your world. This is publication week, isn't it, as well?
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for having me back on, Wayne. How am I doing? Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm quite nervous, but I keep giving myself little pep talks and bringing myself off the ledge, I think. So, yeah, I'm right. I'm currently talking to you from my study, which I think is where I probably was talking to you from back in, was it 2020 or 2021?
Yeah, I think it was 2020, yeah.
And I did re-listen the other day in the gym, and
So
I'm
did
glad
I,
to say
actually, yeah.
I've got a better microphone now. Hopefully.
I've noticed,
So
yeah.
it will be better. That was my first thought. Now that I podcast myself, I was like, oh my God, what was I doing with?
Yeah,
I
you
didn't
don't
have a
realise until
microphone.
you actually do
No,
it.
exactly.
Yeah. To be fair,
Yes.
most people don't have a microphone when you speak to them, so that's fine. It normally works out. Just makes me sound like really good in comparison.
Yeah. So I know not much has changed, actually. I was really surprised listening to myself back about how little my writing process has changed. I'm still obsessed with Scrivener and Post-its
Yeah, me too.
and the colourful binder on the side. I kind of feel that I've grown massively since then. But actually, at the same time, listening to myself back, I'm exactly the same person, which is good.
Well, that's good. Well, you kind of mentioned you're a bit nervous because as we record this, you are like 2 days out from publication of your Elsie North thriller,
Yes.
The Ugly Truth. So tell us about that.
So, The Ugly Truth is about a famous model called Melanie Lang, and she's Britain's most famous celebrity. So she's spent 2 decades of her life in the public eye. But then one day she disappears after her birthday celebrations end in chaos. And sort of that's where we open the story up, because 4 months later, secret videos emerge of Melanie Lang claiming she's being held prisoner by her father, billionaire business tycoon Sir Peter Lang. But when Sir Peter releases a statement claiming that Melanie is safe and being well cared for in a mental health facility, the media and the nation are thrown into this massive frenzy of who to believe. Are you Save Melanie or are you Help Peter? Which are the hashtags that have been brilliantly used in the book campaign. So Netflix commissioned a documentary on Melanie's life to uncover the ugly truth. And suddenly everyone she's ever known has a story to tell about her. So that's sort of where that's the blur, really, I guess,
yeah.
and what the story is about. So it's told exclusively through the Netflix transcripts, interviews, Twitter, and diary entries. It's all about fame, power, and the truth behind the headlines, really. So I absolutely love writing it.
Well, I loved reading it. It was great. It's really good. No, I really loved reading it. And it's not really, I don't mean the subject matter, but when I first started reading it, I was a bit like, oh, okay, right. It's not written. It's, like you've just mentioned there, it's written in transcripts and things. I'm like, okay. But once you kind of get into that, it's really, really good. It's really, really different. And it does feel sort of very now. And I was sort of reading it and I was thinking, well, this has got shades of this, I was thinking, there's a bit of the Britney Spears thing in there, and obviously there's a bit of Amy Winehouse, and there's a bit of Caroline Flack, and all these different things. So what was the kind of jumping off point for you? What was the inspiration for you to kind of go down this?
Well, there was a couple of things that happened, and this was 2021. And I was a year ahead with delivering my 4th book to Transworld, who are my publisher at the time, who are absolutely amazing. And I delivered with them my 4th book, All the Wicked Games, and I was a bit ahead of schedule. And so I felt quite a lot of freedom. I was on a new deal book, and I really knew I was ready to take a next step in my career. I knew I was doing well, but I knew I could do better. So it was a real wow, come on, Lauren, where's your motivation here? And at the same time, I was absolutely gripped by this BBC Panorama documentary called The Dubai Princess, about Princess Latifah, who had claimed in secret videos that she was being held prisoner by her father. So you can see where the ideas come from. And her father is obviously a very powerful man, and was like, no, she's absolutely fine, ignore her. And it was amazed to me that no one could do anything, because this was one of the most powerful men in the world, was saying, no, she's absolutely fine, don't listen to her. And this woman was saying, I'm being held prisoner. And it's like, well, what do you do, and whose side are you on, and what do you believe? Because maybe she does have had mental health problems, or maybe she doesn't, and he is holding her prisoner, but what can anyone do about it? And that really triggered my desire to want to write something. And then came along at exactly the same time, the Free Britney movement was on a massive tidal wave across social media, and that again was about a father and daughter and control. And the two of those stories, I think, sort of exploded in my mind about what I was going to write, and not just what I was going to write, but what I wanted to read as well. And I have grown up in a world of weekly magazines and celebrity headlines and all this stuff. Like one week she's on a diet, and the next week she's fat, and the next week she's skinny, and oh look, she's got spots on her face. And I grew up with that, and so for me, it's like it was very natural to want to suddenly capture that in a story. So that's sort of where the idea immediately came from. I mean, you mentioned Britney Spears, and obviously, and I have as well, and there is certain elements of her in the story, but it is not based on her, and it's not based on any one particular celebrity. No. But I think when you read it, there are stories that will feel very familiar to you with, as you mentioned, other ones, but there's Paris Hilton in there, and there's Cheryl Cole in there, and stories that I grew up with that sort of made me wonder, well, what was the truth behind those headlines? And that's what I really wanted to explore. Like, if you scratch the surface, what you get.
And I recently watched one. Well, I think I've watched more than one actually, but the Wagatha Christie stuff. And again, some of the same sort of stuff comes up in that, as regards, you know, friends of these supposed friends, best friends of these people, selling stories behind their back. Not even just the main story in that, you know, they were sort of phoning Vardy, Rebecca Vardy's best, in inverted commas, best friend, sort of telling journalists that they were going to be coming out of a club at certain such and such time.
Exactly.
Because again, some of that rang true when I was reading your book because of that
and
reason.
And I wrote it before that. I know that's exactly right. Everyone's just trying to make their own money.
That's it. And they don't really care, and they've got these ways of like justifying it, and they sort of, you know, they say they're friends and stuff. So you came up with the idea. You got all these different things converging. But when you first, and I know that you're not a pantser, I know that you've just mentioned you've got all your post-its and you like to plan things to the nth degree and everything else. But when you first sat down to write some of this, or to think about it or map it out or whatever, was it always the case that you're going to use this kind of mixed media style with it?
Yeah, certainly a lot of it. And I have always had mixed media in all of my books. So in like my debut, The Perfect Betrayal, there's transcripts between a doctor and a patient. And then in in Safe at Home, there was WhatsApp group messages. It's obviously a medium that I am drawn to. And I think that it's just so true to our lives now with our phones that, you know, we're constantly scrolling, swiping, and staring at those screens. And so I really knew immediately I wanted to capture the element of Melanie's story on that same platform, really. So it felt like you are on your phone really as you're reading it. And I think I originally thought that Sir Peter's side of the story would come through chapters, and we'd see his past, the past chapter, sort of as we see Melanie grow up from when she's thrust into the spotlight at 15, we sort of see his chapters mature and grow with her. But when it came to writing it, one of the things about mixed media, as you'll know because you've read it, is that it's quite a quick read. So it's a very speedy way to move through a book. And if you suddenly jolt that with normal chapters, it can feel like not very pleasant for the reader to keep sort of jolting forwards and back. And you have to sort of continue with the same style of pace. And I couldn't do that with chapters with Sir Peter. So I had the idea, well, perhaps he's telling his own story through
that's a great
autobiography.
Idea. Yeah. No, that works really well with the transcripts, of that, with his ghostwriter. That's a great idea.
Right. I know, thanks. And I've just listened to the audiobook of it, which is the whole cast and their conversations. They recorded them together. And I think that comes across, and their conversations are actually my favourite part of the whole audiobook.
One of the other things that I really liked with, I think it's on the Netflix bit, I loved the twins that you've got. I love the way that, because I could sort of really I could really hear them. You know, they're almost like table tennis, like just batting the way that you've broken it down, picking up each other's lines and things. I thought that was great.
I loved writing them. Jessie and Lola. Yes.
So when you came up with this idea, and you presumably you had to pitch it, how did you pitch it, and did they immediately sort of get what you wanted to do? Did you write a little bit of it at all, or how
Yeah,
did
it's
you
an
go about
interesting
that?
one because I sent an idea to my agent who knew I was sort of at that stage of looking for new ideas. And I sent her an idea and I can't even remember what the idea was. And then the next day, suddenly thought, no, I need to really think about this, and came up with the idea of the ugly truth. And immediately with the idea, within the first 5 minutes, I had the hashtags, I had the title, I had the format. And
Hmm.
I said, ignore my previous email. This is the book I think I should write.
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, do it. Um, and so I wrote it, and it consumed me in the way that books can do sometimes. And so I wrote it actually. I had just this really random, clear, I think 4 or 5 weeks where there was no school holidays, and
Hmm.
I wasn't required for any kind of publication promotions or anything, and there was no edits, and I just had all this block of time, and I just sat and wrote it, and then I came out of it, and I sent it to my B to reader friends, and I said, this is completely different, and it's either really terrible or I'm onto something, and I genuinely don't know which one. And I really didn't. I loved writing it, and it was the kind of book I wanted to read, but everyone's different, and so I was really pleased when my friends came back and went, oh no, it's something. And then my agent at the time saw what I was trying to do, and I was really, really fortunate that my publisher Transworld also saw exactly where I was going and were prepared to take the next step in my publishing journey with me, which doesn't happen very often. I think often you'll see when authors want to make that next step, they often have to move publishers. And I was just really lucky that Transworld are one of those publishers who really want to grow an author, and I felt really fortunate to be one of those.
Yeah, because I know again that wouldn't have been something I'd have been aware of before I sort of did the podcast, and I've certainly become more aware of it over the last couple of years and being in certain critique groups and different things. But I've talked about it before in the podcast. But you sort of think, well, somebody gets an agent, they get a deal, and then unless they do absolutely terrible on that first 2-book deal or whatever, there'll just be another couple of books, and then there'll be another couple. But aside from that, you sort of think, well, once they've sort of accepted the first book, then I'll say, right, here's my next book, and they go, thank you, and they pick the book up.
Yeah, no,
But like
it's weirdly not like that.
no, because I know, like, from speaking of one of my friends, and she's basically written like 4 books to get to book 2. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, that's really
It's been
tricky.
really, really,
Yeah,
really hard. And
that is
she's
really
not on her own.
hard.
I've known other people that have said
Yeah,
similar stories,
yeah. If you're
depending
in
on how you,
contract,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they're expecting, and they can sort of say, yeah, because I think, again, like, I think you just assume, well, it's a 2-book contract. So obviously you've taken on my first book. So here's my second book. And they're like, no, we don't want that one.
yeah.
We want one that's a bit more like the first book, or
Yeah, the
whatever it is, whatever
same
the reason
but
is.
different. That is the
Yeah.
trick. The same
Yeah.
but different. And it's taken me a long time to realize that. I think I'm certainly more focused on being a commercial writer now than I was 5 years ago. I think I recognize now what it is I'm doing, hopefully.
And when you say that, you kind of got that more commercial head on. What does that look like? Is it a case of you're very active in looking at the market and looking at other books that are around and thinking, I'd like to do something similar to that? Or how does that look for you when you're talking
That
about
is such a great question. And I don't think you can look at what books are around, because once
always too
a book
late?
is out,
Yeah.
you're 2 years away from having your
Yeah.
book out, and then it's
Yeah.
been done. So the worst thing you can do is think, oh, look, they've done that, I'm going to do it, because you're going to be really late to the party.
Yeah.
I think when I say I'm thinking about things with a more commercial head, I'm really looking at that killer hook, the elevator pitch, and how commercial it is. And if I can capture an idea in a couple of sentences that is going to make you go, oh my God, I have to read that,
Yeah.
then that is exactly what I need to write. And until, even if I come up with a great idea, and I have loads of ideas, but unless I can come up with a commercial hook for them, I just won't write them, because it's a waste of my time. And I need to make sure I'm really pushing myself commercially at the moment, and putting the best books I can out there. And it's a really competitive market. It's really competitive for people trying to get agents, and it's really competitive for authors as well who've already got agents and who are with publishers. We're all just fighting to survive.
Yeah.
To some extent, there's so many amazing books out there, but we're not competing with each other. We're competing with iPhones and streaming services and people's time.
That's
which
right.
is not in that. People haven't got a lot of time, and if you've got 10 minutes to read every night, then I want to make sure I'm doing everything I can to capture you in those 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. And you talked about your beta readers there, which I've heard you mention in your podcast in Suspense quite a few times. So it sounds like you would let your beta readers in at a relatively early stage.
Oh yeah,
is it fair
first draft. Yeah, trusted, very trusted. But they are authors as well. So they are Nikki Smith, Zoe Lee, and Laura Pearson.
Yeah.
And I met them at Harrogate in 2019, I think. And we just immediately gelled. And we now all read each other's work, and we read it very early on, and we critique it. And I trust them implicitly to tell me whether I'm onto something or not, and where the holes are. And they've saved my bacon more than once. So I'm always cautionary with beta readers, because I think it is great to put your book out there, and it's great to take feedback. But if you are sending it to your mum and your aunt and your brother, who read occasionally but aren't necessarily massive readers, they're not necessarily going to come up with the feedback that you need to develop as a writer. I think if you send it to 10 people and those 10 people will come up with something similar about your character, then that's something worth listening to. But asking 10 people to read a book and critique it is not that easy to find 10 people who are readers, frankly.
I agree,
to that extent, you've got the time.
Especially, and that, I mean, it's one thing that they're readers, but then also, do they read the kind of thing that you're writing?
Yeah,
that's
exactly. In your genre, 100%.
Because that's such a big thing. It's like, it's not for me. So I totally understand that. So when you're sending it out, I mean, are they kind of just giving you broad strokes as regards your feedback? Presumably, if it's such an early draft, they're not sort of giving you edit things so much as, or are they?
Well, I would say that I get a structural edit to some extent from a couple of them, and maybe broad paragraphs on what's working and what's not working, and what they loved and what they were confused by, which I think it's just as important. Like, what did you mean by this? And in a book, you need to really nail it, and there should be no questions at the end unless it's a question you want to be asking your reader. And so just even them saying, well, I didn't know what you meant by that, really helps me understand where I've not nailed it. So they're fantastic authors as well, and I absolutely love reading their books. I drop everything to read their books, and they do the same for me, and I'm just incredibly lucky to be in their friendship group, frankly.
That's a great resource that you've all got there to lean on. That's really, really good. So I think last time you came on, I'm pretty sure One Step Behind, which is Lauren North, isn't it? Yeah. And so this is Elsie North. So tell us a little bit about the Lauren North, Elsie North thing, how it works.
What's happened,
how it works, and why you kind of took the decision to write under different names. Because on the face of it, both authors sort of write a certain flavour of thriller, if you like. So there is an argument for saying, well, why bother making
the name change? Completely understand that. So I wrote One Step Behind I think that came out in 2020. And we had our lovely chat, and then the next year came Safe at Home, which was my lockdown book that I wrote in lockdown, so it's a very anxious mother book. And then in 2022 I had All the Wicked Games out, and they were my 4 Lauren North books. And obviously, as I said, in 2021 was when I was then writing something else, The Ugly Truth, and I sent it to my then publisher Transworld, who's still my publisher, and we just had a conversation about the fact that this was different, and it wasn't like a completely different book, so perhaps it needed just a slightly different name just to distinguish it slightly. So which is why we've gone to initials. So Lauren North writes psychological thrillers focused on family and relationships, and what goes wrong in every what if situation. And Elsie North writes book club thrillers that really ask the question of whose side you on, and celebrities and the media. So that's sort of how we've drawn the distinction. But it is not necessarily like a big distinction. I hope a lot of my Lauren North readers are kind of come across to Elsie North, and I hope that a lot of people who find Elsie North are going to come to Lauren North. But they are slightly different books, and they do have a slightly different genre. So that's really the reason for the name change.
And when you last came on, you were still relatively early in your career. I think you were a couple of years in.
I still feel really early.
Well, you are, but in a way, you're a good few years on now.
Jaded.
And jaded and cynical. So, and you kind of mentioned, I think before we even came on air, but we talked about the fact that you listen to the other show, and your process and stuff has sort of remained remarkably similar. But
Mm.
what do you think you've learned over the past, well, since you first came on scene, 2018 or whenever it was?
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's all about the commercial hook of a book and understanding that it's one thing to write a book because you're passionate about it, but what is it you're trying to achieve? And I'm trying to be a commercial fiction writer, and so my job is to entertain,
Mm-hmm.
and I absolutely love writing it. It's my passion, and it's still the thing I want to do in all of my spare time, which is what I said in 2021 to you, that
Yeah.
if I get a spare hour to myself, I'm going to write. And that's still the case now. I just have so many more hours, which is
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah.
But I work at the weekends and I work in the evenings and I get up really early, and it just it's what I want to do. But yeah, the real difference is in recognizing what I'm trying to achieve as my end game as well. And it's not just about writing a good story, it's about writing a good story that is going to capture the editor's imagination and the retailer's imagination, and is going to sell copies, hopefully.
And have you, in terms of like the actual process, in terms of working with your editor or editors, or presumably have you got different editors? Have you had different editors along the way, or do you tend to work with the same?
I've been really lucky because I think it's one of those industries where people move around and
Yeah.
you can end up with a different editor for every book. And I've been really lucky that I have had only two editors at Transworld, and my current editor, Imogen's absolutely amazing. She was with me she sort of took over from Safe at Home and took on all the Wicked Games, and then was the champion of The Ugly Truth. But I also have now, since LC North has stuck with Transworld, Laura North has moved on to Bookouture, and so I've now taken on a different editor there. So I do work with different editors, and it's if you're professional, which I hope to be, then it's great and it's fine, and you can work with anyone.
Yeah. And tell us, I mean, has that changed? Because presumably when you first started on your journey, that was a relatively new thing for you, working with an editor, and that first day when you get the first big chunk of edits back, and you kind of have to process them and stuff. Has that become easier to deal with? Because you kind of know what to expect now and the types of things that you're going to be looking at. How does it feel when that ping goes off in your
When the
inbox?
structured edits, no, when the structured edits land, it is still the most awful experience. And you read them and you feel sick and you think that there is literally no way that you can do them. And and so I messaged my friends. I'm like, oh, my structured edits are in and it's really awful. And they're like, just give it a couple of days, let it all sink
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
And lo and behold, you give it a couple of days, you let it all sink in. And then especially, I'm literally in the halfway through doing structured edits at the moment. And I must have spent a week making list after list after list of everything that needed to be done, and then shortening those lists, and then adding bits into the manuscript that I knew, like I was like, change this bit here, kind of like the specific things and then the broader things. And then every day I just look back at that list and just keep working towards it. But structural edits are an amazing thing because I think you hold a huge amount of information and knowledge in the back of your head that you don't really think about, and it's
Yeah.
almost like juggling invisible balls
Yeah.
that you've got and you are
Yeah.
doing, but you if you don't look too closely for them because they're not there.
Yeah.
And that's what's amazing about structured edit. It's so draining but great.
How much easier does Scrivener make that though?
Well, yes, you'd think brilliantly, wouldn't you? But I'm a massive advocate for Scrivener, and I obviously
Yeah.
use it massively in my first draft. And I thought, and literally last week I was like, right, I'm gonna do my structured edits in Scrivener. But I, for some reason, only can work really well with structured edits if they're printed out and I can scribble all over them. And it is
Right.
such a long and arduous process, and it's the most draining, awful thing to have to type up your really weirdly scribbled notes that you hope you're going to understand. But that's just how I work. So I did spend quite a long time putting my book back into Scrivener, and it was a waste of time because actually I work better by printing it out and then
Well,
typing it
that's
back
one of
up.
those
So
things, I guess, if you've kind of worked it out.
yeah,
See,
you find the way that works for
yeah,
you.
because the thing that I love about Scrivener from that point of view is the fact that I can just grab,
Whole scene.
a scene or
Yeah.
chapters or however you decide to split it up, and just do that, and I keep like an extra folder that's not in the book, that's kind of offcuts and things that I've
Yeah,
not
no, I
used,
absolutely
and
love that side of it.
and being able to split it a chapter and stuff. And to me, that I cannot imagine doing it in like doing the
No,
same sort of thing in words, in
no, not
literally
at
just copy
all.
and pasting and trying to get my head around it. That
And
must be really,
scrolling
really.
back and forth, yeah, absolute pain. And my Scrivener is so colourful because with the books that I write now with LC North, you've got a different colour for all the different mixed media and a different colour for different characters,
That's
and so
what
it's
I do. Yeah.
very colourful.
Yeah, I do. I've done that with my books so far. Same thing. I've got blue and yellow, I think it is, just to split, so I could just quickly see, oh, hang on,
Yeah,
this looks
isn't
really
that
heavy on
amazing?
that POV. I
Yeah.
know it's a simple thing. And the other thing that I do is and again, apologies for non-scrivener. People are so divided on this
Apologise.
issue.
Everyone should be on Scrivener.
This is what you tend to find. But I speak to some writers, and you just start to say it. They go, "No, I'm not interested in it. I don't. It looks horrible. It's really, really complicated. I'm not.
Yeah,
I
it did take
once
me a
tried
while
to
to get
do
into
it.
it,
Yeah,
actually.
and they kind
Yeah,
of
and
lose it.
if you're a pantster, there is literally no reason for you to be anywhere near Scrivener, to be fair. So, and pantsters exist, and they are phenomenal writers. And even though I break into a cold sweat when I interview them on our podcast, I love their books, and I'm so amazed by what they achieve. Like Fiona Cummings, for instance, a phenomenal writer. Her books are so twisty, and yet she is a pantster, which I'm a plant. Around.
I'm what I call myself a plantster.
Oh, yeah.
because essentially I probably do a little bit more plotting than I used to do, as in just sort of thinking, okay, I've got a rough idea I want to go, but I what I tend to do is first of all, like, I'm writing another book at the minute it's not in the same it's the same sort of genre, but it's a bit different that I'm writing in a minute. But I sort of
you just landed this one on me. You've got a whole new book going on.
Oh no, yeah, I'm about 40,000 words in.
Exciting.
But yeah, so I'm doing, and it's a different style. It's the same sort of genre, but it's a different style. But again, I sort of wrote my way into that. And then I sort of think, okay, well, this is going to be a POV character. This is going to be what I'm liking about this new book is I've got more POV. It's all written close third person, so there's no first person in this. And it's multiple perspective. But then crime, yeah. And then what I tend to do is one of the things that I love about Scrivener is you can just quickly, obviously, make a document at the side, which can be a screen, a scene, or a chapter, depending on how you write. And then all I do is I just type a sentence in there about what I think I might say, so and so funeral, or after the funeral, or da-da-da. And I tend to do that. I'll do that for a few chapters ahead, so I've kind of got a rough idea of where I want to go. Often I don't end up getting there, or I'll end up writing a ridiculously long chapter and splitting it into 3 chapters or whatever. But I tend to do that. I can't.
I do the same, but with the whole book. So I literally have the whole, a sentence or more in every single scene that's going to happen in the book. And like you say, some chapters become 2 chapters or 3 chapters, but generally speaking, that every single scene in the book is there. And then I can jump back and forth, and I don't write sequentially. I'll just write whatever I feel like writing that day, and I'll jump
you see,
around.
I do struggle with that because I like the idea of it, but whenever I've done it where I've kind of gone a bit ahead and I've written it, I almost always have to radically change it, because by the time I get there, things are a little different than I thought they were going to be.
And I think, and that's true as well. And I think the thing that I do is my first draft is very much plot driven, and I don't really know who my characters are until probably the end of the first draft. And at that point, I will then go back through the whole book, and everything's focused on the character then. And so, like you say, the dialogue will change, and you sort of realize who they are and what their motivations are. And so, then in that draft, things then change dramatically. But I think, in my first draft, it's all, well, this is what's happening because this is the plot and this is what this person's saying, and they're going to not talk like that when it comes to it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm the opposite from the point of view. I do really write my way into it, so I'll find. And then what I find is that from the way that the people speak and behave or whatever, that will often suggest plot. So I'll be doing something and I'll think, I mean, I've had it where I've sort of think, I've got a rough idea. I think, I want this thing to happen in the plot. Then when it comes to it, because I've written my way into it and I know the character pretty well, I just think no, they would
They
not
wouldn't
do
do
that.
it. But
They would
isn't
do
that so
this, and then it messes. Oh, it's
exciting?
brilliant! It's brilliant, but also it totally messes everything up
Yeah.
because you're like, now this
But
can't
all the
happen, but
times
you
where they
follow it
wouldn't do
instead.
something, they'll do something as well that you're like, oh my God, you've just killed someone. I did not know you were going to do that.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
absolutely love that
definitely.
for
And I think
books.
that's the thing when you first start writing, trying to write novels, in the distant mists of time, is lots of I know from speaking to people, and I know I definitely did this. You tend to you make loads of things happen to your character. Like
Mm,
just one thing happens after another. Just keep happening to them, and they're reacting to it. And the light bulb moment comes when instead of just reacting to things, they proactively do things that make things worse.
yeah, no, that's so true. And in fact, I think I really learned that in Safe at Home. I think I heard that bit of advice just before I wrote Safe at Home, which is my third book. And I really took that on board that you can't have a passive character. You have to have a character that's going out of their way to not just have things happen to them, but to create things in the plot. And yeah, that was a new learning one for me, I think, as well, quite recently.
I mean, I think the reality is, most good protagonists, they tend to something obviously happens at the beginning, an inciting incident or whatever, and then most of the book is spent with them doing things that in one way or another actively make the situation worse until at a point it doesn't make it worse, that hopefully gets better if that's what you want to do with your ending or whatever, obviously, but they kind of come to some kind of resolution. But most of the book, inadvertently, they're making it they're
Yeah,
making it worse with,
absolutely.
but they're trying to do something, but the things that they're doing are actually making things worse, or at
Yeah.
least having they're having an impact on the um rest of the story, which is, like you say, it's really fun to write, but you also think to yourself, why have I written myself into
Yeah, this
this
is a big hole.
corner? I have no idea how I'm going to get out of this. But that's the fun in the
Yeah,
that's
the
the
joy of it.
the challenge. So we were talking, or we've been talking recently about mentors, because
Yes.
I'll tell people why that is, because we were talking about ThrillPit. Wait, well, first of all, tell us what ThrillPit is, Lauren.
Great question. So ThrillPit is the brainchild of Becca Day, who's a fantastic author. And I met Becca a couple of years ago on social media, and I was sort of talking to someone was mentioning how great mentoring is. And I was like, oh, I'd really like to have a go at being a mentor, but, I don't know how to go about it. And she was sort of looked at the chat and was like, I'm right here, Lauren, and I would love to be mentored by you, if you can help. And I was like, great, this is brilliant. This is really easy. Then I don't
Yeah.
need to worry about finding one. And so we worked together for a little while. And then she got an amazing agent in Emily Glenister, and she got a fantastic book deal with Embla. She's doing so well, and I think that she probably saw the experience that her and I had and decided to create ThrillPit, which is I don't even know what the word is. It's a process whereby people can
Scheme, maybe.
scheme. So it's a scheme. Yes,
Yeah.
it's a free scheme where someone can submit their opening of their books for to find a mentor. And so the idea is that you choose the mentor. We all there's a few of us authors on there, and we say kind of the books we really like reading, and an aspiring author will look on there and sort of choose the mentor that's best for them. And we get sent like a bunch of submissions, and then we had to choose sort of which one we felt was going to be the best to work with for whatever reasons, but what we were looking for. I think there's 5 of us authors this time around. I'm sure Becca will do it again.
Yeah.
So it's called #ThrillPit, and it was a really fantastic experience, and really great to read so many really fantastic and interesting submissions. And you were one of those, Wayne, and I was so delighted because I really enjoyed reading the opening of your novel, and have selected you as the winner for my ThrillPit, which is really fantastic for me.
Well, it was fantastic for me. Like, I'm pardon the pun, but I was thrilled. But yeah, it's brilliant, and I was delighted when I got your email, because it is a really big thing. I mean, I've been, as I'm sure you have along the way, you meet people and you get lots and lots of help and different bits and pieces. But I think actually having somebody that's kind of specifically looking at what you're doing and trying to get you to the next level is really
someone in your
important.
corner. And I think that
Yeah.
I didn't have that at all. I had no one, and I feel like I was walking around in the dark for years. And I mean, I did eventually get an agent, and I have grown massively since that point. But there was a long time where I was just like, what on earth am I doing? And who do I speak to? And for a long time, there wasn't even the social media network and community that there is now. And I really started out in the
Yeah.
early days.
Yeah.
And so for me, mentoring is a way to sort of really help those who are in my situation, and in a way that I didn't get that help from. So I get a lot from it, and I think I really love being able to help authors. So I'm so thrilled to be able to work with Becca, who's such a talented author, and just to I'm not working magic. You guys are the ones who are really talented, and I'm just giving you nudges and a little bit of guidance, and you're doing it all yourselves. And so I get some of the glory. But Becca's amazing, and
Yeah.
I'm so thrilled for what she's doing. And I've got another mentee who I can't mention yet because it's not official,
Sure.
who's just signed a new book deal. And I've got another mentee who's just found an agent who's out on submission to
Fantastic.
publishers. And it's wonderful to see that process, to see them grow, and just to think that they would have absolutely got there eventually on their own. I just hope, perhaps I've helped them get there.
Yeah, well, I
quicker,
think it's
and to make the process a bit easier for them, maybe.
Yeah, because I think we talked about it before we came on air, but one of the biggest things, it's not new, people talk about it all the time, but the perseverance side of things. And I think it's that kind of writing in a vacuum. I mean, don't get me wrong, as I say, I've been in critique groups and different bits and pieces, and that definitely does help. But after a period of time, you do start to think, can I actually write? You can't help it. You start to think,
yeah, no, of course.
Am I wasting my time here? Is this just okay or whatever? So I think if you kind of get like somebody that's got a little bit of objectivity about it and sort of tells you, no, you can do it. You just keep going, go down this route or whatever. It's such a big lift. It's such a big, boost.
Yeah, I think so, because agents are people who are in your corner and fighting for you. And until you've got an agent, there is no one in your corner. Like, you've got a community, hopefully, and you've got friends, but you haven't got that one person in your corner. And that's what a mentor does until the agent comes along. And I still chat to my mentees who've got agents, and I still help them out with a few things, but they're very much I'm very much not too many cooks in the kitchen kind of situation.
When they're actually,
I love to be that person, champion them and doing all I can to help them until they find their path, which is it's such a privilege, frankly, to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's great. It's as you say, it is rewarding. I mean, I love helping. I've always liked helping other writers and getting feedback and helping each other out and looking at each other's work and all that kind of thing. And I think one of the big things before you kind of meet other writers or whatever is, I think you've kind of got this thing in your mind that we're all competing in this and that and the other, but we're not. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's not going to be a case of someone's going to buy this book instead of that book. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to be well, they might do as regards money, but I mean, in terms of like I've bought this, I've bought this is the only crime book that I'm going to read this year or whatever. It doesn't work like that.
No.
And I think it's like any of these things. It's the same with a music scene or anything else. If you actually kind of create a bit of a scene and a bit of a community with it, I think you kind of all lift each other up as regards that, and you can all champion each other's work and what each other do and stuff. I think it's a really big deal.
Yeah, and it helps me as well, because I might be giving a critique that's like, oh, is your character as likable as they can be? Is in this scene, are you really showing them for their best light that's going to really draw the reader in? And then I'll go to my own work and I'll think, oh, hang on, is my character doing that? So I think we all know the writing rules and we all know what we're trying to achieve, but it's very easy to get lost in the process. And I think for me, mentoring, it's selfishly really helps me, because it keeps me grounded on what I'm trying to achieve, writing the best book I can write. So I love it.
It's so much easier to look at somebody else's work, take the big picture, look at someone else's work, because you've not got skin in the game. It's like, oh yeah, I can see this would be much better if you did that. Like one of the
Yeah, I'm
things,
just like what I said to you was like, oh,
yeah,
you know what? Do you just completely rewrite these first three chapters?
yeah,
No,
and
you've got
this,
it. You're a great writer and you've really nailed it. But actually, can you just completely rewrite them?
but yeah, but the weird thing with it was as well is like when you give me some initial feedback, one of the things that you'd said, the reason I immediately like it chimed with me was because you talked about without like really giving away anything about the book specifically, but you talked about something that happens in Spain. And
Mm.
you said, "Oh, you know, it'd be right, good to see that." And I'm like, "Well, that was in the book at one
Yes.
stage. That was in there." And for various reasons, I took it out. It's never been submitted. Like that's never been in like a submitted version of the book. Um, you know, it was something that I wrote quite kind of late on and sort of added into the book, and then I changed my mind about it and I took it out. And I was like, when you sort of said it, I was like, "Well, I did have that."
Yeah, I know. But you do
Maybe my
second guess
instinct
yourself, don't
but yeah, maybe
you?
my initial instinct with that was right then, you know, and it's stuff
Absolutely.
like that. So I do think that's one of the things, and I think being able to sort of say, well, I've got this idea for this scene, or I was thinking of maybe playing it like this. What do you think of that idea?
Yeah.
Or
Well,
you
we had
know,
a really great chat. We have a half an hour chat before we even started recording, talking
yeah,
about the book
yeah,
and a few other
yeah,
things. So, yeah, no, I agree. It's like bouncing ideas off each other is really great, and that's it's if you can find people who can do that with you, then that's brilliant. And there are so many different mentoring schemes out there, and I think it is just a case of keeping your ear to ground and looking out for follow your favorite authors. So many authors mentor,
mm,
and just keeping a real eye out on what they're doing, because when a slot comes available, it's going to be, oh, I've got, you know, a spare three, well, not a spare 3 months, but in the next 3 months, I've got
yeah,
space for another mentor, a
yeah,
mentee, you know, if
yeah,
some to me this week, and I'll choose one. And if you
yeah,
don't see it in that week, you've missed your
yeah. That's
chance,
right.
really.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's worth just keeping a real close eye on what's going on.
I think it's great as well that the idea of kind of paying it forward, you know, but I mean, in your case, you didn't have a mentor, so you're paying it forward with that.
Oh,
Actually,
but what
have
Becca's done's amazing.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, she's so phenomenal. She's going to be taking over the world for
yeah. Well,
sure.
and that's great because you can like have a little bit of like you say reflected pride in that because you were
Yeah,
part of it.
it's
You
like
can though.
kids, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, so proud.
Yes.
Um, so in terms of like goals for your career, what are some of, I mean, you may or may not want to share this on air, I don't know, but what have you kind of got sort of goals for your long-term goals for your career,
Yeah,
midterm
I
goals or
have. So I subscribed almost a year ago actually to Sophie Hannah's Dream Author Program. I don't know if you've heard of that,
no?
but she is obviously a really talented author who writes thrillers, and she writes the Poirot series for Agatha Christie brand now. And she is a phenomenal woman who just has such an amazing perspective on the world. And she is in herself a life coach.
Hmm.
And so she's created almost a coaching program for authors. And I spent a year sort of being part of her program. So it's much easier for me to talk about goals now than a year ago,
Yeah, yeah.
because and you get really caught up in things as well. And it's about gaining perspective. So for instance, one of my goals is to become a charted bestseller. So I would love to see one of my books in the Sunday Times or the Times or the New York Times
Yeah,
bestseller list. And I'm not going to fail if that doesn't happen this time around or next time around. That's still going to be my goal.
yeah,
You know, it's going to happen at some point in my life, because I'm going to keep taking the steps towards that goal as best as I possibly can. So
yeah,
it's about having perspective. So yeah, I've got goals to take over the world, and I'm just like taking my steps towards them as
yeah,
best I
yeah.
can. And yeah, not sweating it if I have a setback, because it doesn't alter the goals at the end of the day. So if I'm sounding a bit kooky, it's dream
No.
author. Like, this is, guys, if you're recognizing anything in this word, check out Sophie Hannah's Dream Author Program, because you know, I had her onto the podcast, Leslie and I did, and
Hmm.
I thought of myself as quite a confident person, quite a confident author, and
Hmm.
I really believed in myself. So I knew about her program, and I didn't think that I was someone who perhaps needed to be on the Dream Author Program.
Hmm.
But actually, she in the space of 10 minutes talking to us on our podcast
Hmm.
sold it to me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really great. So you can also check out our episode of Sophie Hannah on
Yeah,
our
that
podcast.
people should do.
Have
Yeah.
a real listen of that
Yeah.
and see, because she's a really wise woman, I would say. So yeah, I sounded probably like I'm in part of a cult, but it's a good one.
No, you don't. I think it's good. And I think one of the big things, coming back to what you said near the top of the show, is this idea that you'd still, regardless of what happens, you'd still write. Like if all the actual the deals and everything else fell by the wayside, as sad as that would be, you would still write.
Oh, yeah.
And I think if you've got that in whatever you do, I think if you still can maintain and hold on to that love of something like that, then, in the big scheme of things, you'll be all right.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. Just keep going with the passion for it. And if you're getting setbacks, it's just a very minute thing within the grand scheme of things, I think. So that's what I try and hold on to. And I don't always achieve it. Like, I was tying myself in knots just over the weekend about what I'm really trying to do with The Ugly Truth and how important that book is to me. But then sort of took a step back this week and thought, well, it's out of my control now, and I've done the best I can writing that book, which is all us authors can do.
Yeah.
Everything else is someone else's job.
And it's the most important bit of it as regards being a writer. Well, it is, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That I know that in terms of, I mean, unfortunately, it's not the most important bit of it. It seems as regards actually selling it. But in terms of like your job in the but in terms of your part of the process and your job, your actual job, your job is to write the best book that you possibly can.
And that's really what I'm trying to do. That's real the end game. The goal for me is every single book. Am I challenging myself? Am I pushing myself? Am I writing the best book I can write for where I am at this moment in time? And that's really the focus.
How do you deal with that other side of it, though, that the sales side of it and everything, as regards, like you say, because a lot of that is totally out of your hands. Obviously, you've got a good team and all the rest of it. But how do you deal with that?
Probably a question to ask me in 3 months' time, I think. But I would say that I think keeping busy is really important. So I'm currently knee deep in structured edits. I don't have time to worry about what emails are coming through. I'm really on a deadline myself. So keeping busy is important, and remembering that even if the book you're writing, the book that's out, isn't doing as you wanted it to do, you've not in any way failed, because there are going to be other books and you're still have got a load of time to achieve your goals, I think. So trying to keep a bigger perspective on things is really important to me now. And keeping busy. Did I mention running?
I know that you keep busy. You're a workaholic.
Yeah, exactly. Work. Run.
That's how you deal with it. Well, that's kind of a great place to wrap things up. But before we do, tell people where they can find more information about you online and stuff.
Oh, thanks so much, Wayne. I've really enjoyed this chat. So people can find me on all social media platforms. I'm always hanging out by the social media water cooler. So I'm at Lauren_C_North on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm at Lauren North Author on Facebook. So do get in touch for a chat, and
go and check out The Ugly Truth.
Yes, that's what I was just about to say. Go and buy it, please.
Yeah,
it'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. Because when this comes out next week, the book will be out, and
and I will hopefully be a calmer person.
Yeah. Well, it's great. People should definitely go and check it out. It's brilliant.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much for coming on. It's been great, Lauren. But for now, thanks for coming on Joined Up Writing.
Thank you so much.
Joined Up Writing.
So thanks again to Lauren, and I'll put all of her links in the show notes over at joinedupwriting.co.uk, and you should definitely check out The Ugly Truth, which I loved. So that's it for this week, but don't forget you can find the entire back catalogue of interviews on the website. Make sure you subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Overcast, or wherever else you get your podcasts from, and that way you can have the podcast downloaded automatically every time. Also remember to leave us a nice rating and review on Apple Podcasts, because it really does help others to find the show. Or, just tell a few of your friends. That would be marvellous. So that's it for this week. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy writing, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.